Welcome to Virtual Face to Face with Dr. Bruce Jarrell. I'm Alex Lakowski, Executive Director of Media Relations. Almost exactly 5 months ago, March 12th, the announcement was made that mandatory telework was being implemented at UMB. Now, if you'll recall, the pandemic situation was changing very, very rapidly at that time, so the telework order did not include very many specifics, such as how long telework would last or precisely how it would be carried out. The main goal was to keep as much of our community as possible home and thereby less vulnerable to infection by COVID-19. Of course, there were a lot of other major policy changes in those early weeks, too, restrictions on travel, in-person learning, research, but probably none impacted so many so profoundly as the order to stay home. We who telework, or mostly telework, are sharing that experience, the good and the bad of it, with millions of Americans. Now, on the plus side, there's a much shorter and traffic-free commute. There's the money we're not spending on everything from dry cleaning to Starbucks, even haircuts for a while there. And for many, the greatest benefit of all, complete sartorial liberation. Maybe you saw the cover of the New York Times Magazine last weekend, which proudly declared sweatpants forever. But for all the freedom telework has promised, it's also come with a long list of real issues like the emotional toll of reducing human contact to a bunch of little faces on a computer screen, challenges surrounding childcare and schooling at home, bosses and colleagues with different expectations about the length of the workday or even the work week, and even insecurity about professional growth and advancement. And don't forget about the real operational limitations of the home offices. And I'm not just thinking about pets and kids. So, how have we done these past 5 months and what have we learned? Is everything going to go back to just the way it was when the pandemic ends, or is some of this going to stick? How have the views of university leadership evolved, and what can the university do to improve the working conditions and the effectiveness of teleworkers and teleworking teams? Our guests today have been right in the thick of it. Matt Lasecki is Associate Vice President of Human Resource Services, and Juliet Dickerson is Director of Staffing and Career Services, also in HRS. Welcome to you both. I need to remind everyone that this program is being recorded and will be posted on the UMB Recovery website, umaryland.edu/coronavirus. Later in the program, you, the audience, will have a chance to ask questions. Don't be shy. That's why we're here. Look for the chat button at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a speech bubble. Use that to send me your question, and when the time comes, we'll call on you by name. I'll unmute your mic for you, so all you have to do is speak up. If you're watching on Facebook Live, I'll do my best to relay your questions for the panel. So with all that out of the way, here's your host, UMB Interim President, Dr. Bruce Jarrell.
Good afternoon, and Alex, thank you for the introduction. Juliet and Matt, welcome to being on the program, and thank you for being a part of this. Let me start out by not only welcoming you, but as you can see, I'm still teleworking as well. I do spend the majority of my time at my office at home. I do get in occasionally when I have certain duties I have to do, but I'm in the same situation as many of you. I've learned to relive my life in a different way. I think you're all aware that this virus is not behaving the way we're used to viruses behaving. This virus has fooled us at every twist and turn. It's clear that in Baltimore City and in the state, at best, things are stable. And we have had, I think, terrific leadership from our governmental and governor, our leaders. And yet Maryland is sort of holding its own or drifting down. That's a good thing. Nationally, that doesn't seem to be quite as predictable. And certainly many states are having a resurgence. So as much as I would like to sit here and say to you, the end is near, unfortunately, I think the answer is, I don't know when the end's going to be. I know that for the next several months, we're going to have to continue to telework until it's safe for us to be back on campus. And I want to emphasize, we have a big university to run, but we have a whole lot of people to keep safe. And I will always say that my first priority is to keep everybody safe, to the extent that I can do that. So I wish I had an answer to this question that keeps hanging out there. When do we get back? I don't know when we'll get back. And I also don't know under what conditions we'll get back. We'll have to monitor the virus. And also we'll have to learn from being at home. I think all of us have learned new ways to interact, to get things done. And I think some of that is a very good lesson and will not go away. Other things will change back a little bit to the way we did it. So with that, Matt and Juliet, again, welcome. And you are right at the tip of the spear relative to teleworking and HR. So maybe you could give us a sense of what kind of feedback you're getting from our many folks who are working at home in this teleworking mode. Juliet?
Sure, Dr. Jarrell, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting us and having us share this important information. So HR is getting all kinds of information, everything from this is really working well for me to this isn't working at all for me, and everything in between. And it cannot be underscored how challenging and complex moving our almost the entire university to telework status in the short amount of time that we did, and the issues that have presented it. And for a lot of concerns and challenges, they're sort of just evolving now, as we have started to move from we're only teleworking for 2 weeks, now we're only teleworking for a month, to this is a short time, to, well, maybe this is really what our new normal or some of it will look like. As a campus, we are just now starting to move our thinking in the direction of what will we need to do to help our employees be successful, our students be successful, if this really is our new normal. And so the more information that HR has, the better. We want to hear from employees. We've surveyed employees. Matt will be able to speak to the surveys that have gone out and some of the results that have come back in already. Our commitment is to continue to do that because we need to know, we want to hear firsthand what's working, what isn't working, what can be tweaked. We can't solve everything for everybody. Obviously, we just don't have that capacity as much as we wish that we could. But we want to hear it. We want to know what the concerns are so that we can really keep that information top of mind. Matt, do you want to talk about that?
Juliet, I agree. I think what we have to realize is that we're in a learning mode here. And as both Dr. Jarrell and Juliet have said, we very quickly moved into a telework environment. And over that time, we've been learning and we've been growing. We have not been static on something like this. About a month ago, maybe a little bit longer, we surveyed staff and faculty about what were some of their challenges, what were some of the things that were working really well. And just as a quick sample, we found, not surprisingly, one of the things the majority of the teleworkers thought was positive is not having to commute. And on an add to that is that commuting time became productive time. Whether it was caring for family members or it was doing work, people were not spending an hour in the car in the morning and an hour in the car in the evening. And so that time became more useful to them. The other thing that on the positive side, people really appreciate the flexibility that we're experiencing as a university. And I think overwhelmingly, we've done a great job with being flexible with hours, with how people are working. We're still, as I said, learning and growing. We're not perfect at this, and we'll continue to learn and grow over time. A couple of the challenges that we've run into so far, that flexibility also brings a challenge with work-life balance. And some of the literature out there, you're starting to see a change from work-life balance to work-life blend. Because you may be providing care to a 9-year-old who is just running around in the front yard with your dog and a hose, which actually just happened about 10 minutes ago for me, and have to shift very quickly over into a work mode. And I think one of the things UMB has done very effectively is to encourage our supervisors, encourage our managers to have that flexibility. One other thing that I'll put out there that we learned through the survey, and I know that we'll get to this further on in our conversation today, is a large number of our staff and faculty report that they have children in the K through 12 age. And so I know we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but it is something that's top of mind that our leadership have been considering and that a number of other groups have been working on. So again, I know we'll touch more on that a little bit later.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt and Juliet. For those of you listening, remember that the second half of this is typically questions that you write or call in. So as you're sitting there listening, feel free to add things to our question list. That would be most helpful. So of course, there have been surprises along the way. There have been good surprises and not so good surprises. Matt, can you think of a really good surprise from the teleworking?
Yeah, and I'll say this actually comes from the survey that we got back from the staff side. We had something on the neighborhood of 70% of the respondents, and we had about 1,100 respondents across campus. About 70% of the people that responded said that they were slightly or extremely more productive in a telework environment than not. And so that right there was something that we really didn't expect. It speaks to, again, the way that we quickly moved and flexed and were able to help people establish expectations and guidance in telework. But that was definitely a surprise right off the bat.
Yeah. Juliet, did you have any positive surprises?
Yeah, I mean, I am daily just amazed at the amount of work that continues to be done, produced, created. It feels like in a lot of respects, we never missed a beat on this campus. Like, I can't think of one process, procedure, program that was interrupted for more than a blip to adjust to this. And that's all people. That's not systems. That's not applications. To me, that speaks to a level of dedication to UMB that it's hard to capture anywhere in surveys and anything. But in order for this big, huge machine to run as smoothly as it does and to continue the way it did, it takes the daily, hourly, minute by minute commitment of the people who power all of these processes. And that has been so heartwarming and inspirational on so many levels, big and small. I can't even describe it.
Are there things that we could have done better, or are there consistent surprises that you're disappointed in that, again, we could learn from, Juliet?
I think there's always things you can do better. One term that I frequently use when I'm working with either in HR, outside of HR, is that you just have to really be gentle with yourself because this was so unprecedented. Yeah. Nobody could have predicted it. You couldn't plan for it. No tabletop exercise would have gotten to the complexity of what we managed. There's lots of things we could have done differently. There's the communication. There's lots of things we could have probably done better. The fact that we have continued our operations, though, to me, says that we identified those things in the moment, a lot of them, and fixed them quickly and just kept moving. And we're still doing it today. We still do it. It's an ongoing commitment to making the place run as efficiently as it can.
Matt, is there anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, just briefly, I think when we started out, we were reactive and working to the best that we could at that time. I think over the course of the first month to 6 weeks of being in this remote work environment, we shifted feet to being proactive. And so what started out is we just need to figure out a way to get this done. It became a really forward-thinking approach to what's coming down the pike and how do we try and address issues before they really have a major impact on our workforce.
Absolutely, I would agree.
Yeah, for me, one of the surprises was I never particularly thought of myself as a highly social individual, and yet I enjoyed immensely meeting with people in person and having discussions and walking down the hall and discussing something. And I really miss that a whole lot. And of course, we're making UMB work right now, and a lot of that's based upon all the prior relationships that we all established. And we are going to have to find ways to have better social interactions and develop those relationships the longer we do this kind of operating. So to me, that was probably where I got surprised the most. I learned something about myself there. Keep your questions coming in, please. We're looking forward to them. In terms of any other challenges that you've had from the HR point of view of how you deal with something or a policy that got in the way or something like that? Juliet?
Sure. So we had the telework policy pre-COVID was obviously not designed for COVID. And so it was a glaring sort of albatross around the campus's neck in terms of what we needed in a COVID environment. So that was quickly identified. It was modified quickly in the moment, as Matt stated, to react to the fact that we were going out back in March, under relatively short notice. And then as the weeks went on and we got more and more experience, and then really it became clear that we wouldn't be coming back to campus in April or May or June, like we kind of thought we might be in March. Then it really gave us the opportunity to look at that policy closely and revise it so that it fit the campus's needs. And that's just one policy. The system has looked at our leave policies, I can say, and Matt can certainly speak to this as well. At the system level, there's as much a commitment to the campuses as there's a commitment from our campus leadership to us. And so there's a recognition across the system that we all need flexibility. We all need the ability to meet the needs of each of our campuses with as much flexibility as possible.
Yeah, when you think of a state system, flexibility isn't always what comes into your mind.
Not at all.
Matt?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Many of our people out there may or may not know that most, if not all, of the UMB policies derive from USM policies. And very quickly, USM, through guidance from the local institutions, realized that we needed to make some adjustments here and they needed to be done fast. And so credit to USM for allowing flexibility at the local level, as well as on the overall policies like leave, like telework, things like that. I would just make one quick comment about our telework policy. Prior to COVID, it was basically telework was the exception to the rule. And so we had to shift a policy that was focused in that direction to telework is the norm, with on campus being more of the exception. So there was a lot of work done on that. I will highlight one practice and sort of policy that worked really well, and this is a collaboration between HR, One Card, parking, and all the other folks that helped to onboard people. We moved to 100% virtual onboarding with limited on-campus presence, specifically for those people whose jobs are positioned on campus. And so there was a lot of work done amongst a bunch of different departments, and we came up with a program that worked for everybody.
Yeah, and one other thing I would add is that all of these policies weren't modified in a vacuum. First of all, we had a great interaction with one of our university counsel, Elena Kyriakakis. She has been a fundamental influence on our decision making. And second of all, believe it or not, we meet daily as a management group, and there's over 100 people involved in that management group in one way or another. And so all of these policies are closely discussed, and we look for unintended consequences, because we don't want to disadvantage those who have hardships at home or those who are disadvantaged or those types of things. So there's a lot of thought going into this, and I hope that has lessened the number of missteps that we make.
Yeah, President Jarrell, can I just jump in real quick and just share a little bit about what you just stated there? Because if you go out into the academic sort of sphere, like if you go on the Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed, any of the websites that are dedicated to higher ed, you really will get a sense of how important it is that UMB has tried to take such care in every step of this process regarding employees, because not all universities have. In fact, there are a lot of universities out there that feel like they've taken quite the opposite approach, more along the lines of, you know, we got to get the work done and we don't care what the impact is to you all employees as people. There's a lot of information out there right now about how universities are managing in COVID. And personally, I just am delighted and proud that whether we get it right or wrong, that it always starts from causing as little harm as possible. What's going to cause the least amount of harm? Like I said, you obviously can't match every situation. However, if you start from that perspective, then hopefully what you land on is something that people can really rally around. And I have to believe that that's contributing to the success of UMB continuing operations.
So in anticipation of this discussion in telework, I figured not many people would be interested in the topic. I see we've got many hundred on the list, and Alex tells me now that his computer is getting overwhelmed in his chat box by questions. So I think we would be well advised to move to some questions. So Alex, the ball is in your court.
Thank you, sir, because we do have a lot of questions. Now, fortunately, many questions are coming in on this from people like Flavius Lilly and Rodney Uran, Safa Pool, but I'm going to let your favorite questioner, Dr. Joe, you mentioned her by name last week, Bonnie Bissonette. She also had this question. So I'm going to let her ask it on behalf of everybody about from where you can telework. Bonnie, are you with me?
I am. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Dr. Jarrell, Dr. Dickerson, Matt. Good to see you all. And I just want to say I absolutely concur before I ask my quick question, Dr. Dickerson. It is absolutely true, not doctor, but I just promoted you, that the way we've done this has been spectacular. I've been following as well other higher education institutions, particularly around global education, and their first reaction is to contract everything. They're letting people go without regard for the future. I want to commend the entire leadership team. So now here's my question. Since we now know that we'll be required, likely many of us, to work remotely for several months, there's no concern about possibly relocating to another location, because how do you know if I'm in Fiji working from the beach, like Dawn Rhodes, for example? No, it's actually a serious question about where we can work from, for example. I know a lot of people have family duties in other places. They might want to go and tend to family while working from someplace else. Can we do that? Are we looking at how we can do that?
But before you answer, I just want the participants to know that a number of people use a very exotic background for the Zoom and WebEx. Ms. Rhodes happens to be one of those, and I enjoy it. So Juliet and Matt, please.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt, do you want to take it or do you want me to take it?
Go ahead, Juliet.
Okay. Kind of what you're getting at is what is the UMB commitment to remote working? And it's a little bit, there's not a straight answer to this because COVID has changed everything. So pre-COVID, we had a commitment to allow employees within commuting distance. You could live in any state within commuting distance, which was roughly about 50 miles from UMB in any direction. We've had different programs that have allowed employees to live and work in other states, but it's typically been driven by the work, the research itself, the project, the contracts. There's a program, Institute in Social Work, that has a whole contract in the state of Texas, and they hire and employ people to work in the state of Texas. So anyway, long story short, COVID has changed quite a bit of that, because what we do know is that each state has very complex employment laws, and the campus has some markers for whether we could even consider it. The first being workers' comp. Any of you all who have had to work through these situations knows if we can't get workers' comp reciprocity with the state, then we can't allow it. But post-COVID, what we're finding out now is that states do have very complex employment laws, and UMB is just at the very early stages of determining how, if, what it will look like to support remote workers. There are tax laws. Some states require you to register as a business entity, even if you have one employee who lives and works in that state. And so it's a very complex issue. What I can say is that HR and legal have this on the front burner. We have a project team in place right now. It's very early stages to try to figure it out.
Matt, anything to add to that?
No, I think Juliet captured it very well. The only thing I would highlight is that it really is a truly complex type of employment relationship, and we do need to take a look at this. And as Juliet said, we have a work group that has already started on this process.
And so, Bonnie, you can't move back to Wisconsin yet, okay? Alex, what you got next?
All right, we've got another popular question. We're going to open the mic for Jill Hamilton in the pharmacy. Jill, ask your question.
Hi, Alex. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to be here because teleworking is my #1 favorite topic. And my question is, oh, by the way, the university's done an amazing job and awesome, but teleworking is my absolute favorite. So down the road, and Juliet, you did touch on this, but down the road, when COVID is over, how will it change how UMB allows teleworking? Because I'm going to be honest, I love working there, but if y'all can tell me I can't telework, I'm not sure what's going to, it really has changed the way in which life is. So what will it look like?
Jill, you mentioned in the chat that you save 40 hours a week because of telecommuting.
That is correct.
Is that right?
I live in Hartford County. So I live in Hartford County, and I drive super early in the morning. I have an early, my supervisor thankfully has let me have an early schedule because of that, because of the traffic. But yes, I have saved 40 hours, and I'm very thankful for that.
Terrific.
Yeah, so excellent question. I think what we're doing is we're continuing to learn. I want to keep coming back to that concept, that if you would have asked that question in March, you might have had a very different answer. But what the real core is, we're learning how to do this and continue to be effective. We're learning what jobs and what people are more effective in a telework environment, because sometimes telework effectiveness comes down to whether it's the right fit for the person. So I think, and I'll go out on a little bit of a limb here, we will certainly take a look at what are the right positions for possible telework in the future, what positions may not be able to telework, and we're going to ensure that there's a lot of flexibility in the workplace. That being said, what comes in November, I'm not exactly sure we can predict that at this point, or in January of next year, or even in February. What I do know is that our senior team is open to looking at options. We're always looking to make sure that our employees, our faculty, our staff have a good experience with us. And so I know that we'll consider that as an option sometime in the future.
Right, and I know that I personally and others are receiving direct input from interest groups on the campus. Certainly the President's Council for Women has strong opinions about how we could help further, and there are plenty of others. So input is good in this. We can't do everything, but there are some things we certainly can do. Alex?
Okay, Nicole Turner in dentistry and Jeff Purnell in ORD raised this question almost at the same time. And Nicole, are you there to ask it?
I am, yes. I had some noise in the background, so I had to get rid of that. Hello to the panel, and thank you to everyone. Dr. Jarrell, I want to say I think you're doing an amazing job, and I appreciate everything that you and the management staff have done.
Thank you.
My question is this. A lot of us are working from home for the very first time, but we're using our own private personal items like PC, laptops, our printers, our cell phones, even stamps that I've been using just to mail some of the checks to the lockbox and things of that nature. So are we going to do anything in regards to maybe supplying more of these items for teleworking, or come up with a reimbursement system that at one time didn't cover this for us, but now maybe will?
Matt, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, yeah. Again, I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record here, but we continue to learn. We continue to identify what are some of the barriers to people being able to successfully telework. One of the topics that has come up is use of technology, whether it's inadequate technology or use of personal technology and the security that goes along with that. Our SITS folks have done a tremendous job in helping to adjust to this environment. I would say that the situation can be individual. And if somebody has a question about whether they can use other technology or purchase other technology, they should have a conversation with their department first. And then from there, we can talk about it through the human resources or other areas to see what options are available.
Juliet, anything to add to that?
The only other thing I'll say is if you are purchasing stamps and those sorts of things that are directly work related, you should be able to be reimbursed for that. Talk to your administrator about that, and if you need me to help, feel free, but you should be able to be reimbursed for those types of items.
And I would want the participants to know that from 11 to 12 today, we had our daily meeting about how we're responding to COVID. The whole topic was information technology, computers, updating, security, making sure that we're protecting everybody involved here. There was definitely discussion about how do we resolve some of these questions that you brought up, Nicole. I hope that you'll get some answers on that fairly soon, particularly since this isn't a flash in the pan now. We're going to be doing this for a while longer. So we've got to have things efficient and safe from a security point of view as well. Alex, anything to add? The next question.
Well, I have another question. Sure. Jana Barcelo is on the line. She has a question about, there are issues that sometimes pop up that we don't think about. And one of those can be inequity in terms of who can and can't telework and whether people are covering for each other. Jana, are you there? Go ahead.
All right. So my first question was if employees that were still on probation can come onto campus if they have their supervisor's permission.
If I heard the question correctly, it was if employees who are on probation can come on campus if they have their supervisor's permission. Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay, so there is an approval process that has to be followed for any employee to be able to come on campus. And it depends. I would encourage everyone to look at the revised telework policy and to go on the COVID website and see the most up-to-date information. But approval to come on campus doesn't reside at the supervisory level, depending on how frequently they will need to come, what the scope of it is. You'll have to get your dean's office involved. Whether they're on probation or not doesn't factor in at all. It's about the work, and you've got to make sure you follow the approval process that's in place.
Okay.
Matt, anything to add?
No, I think Juliet got it all right there.
Yeah, let me kind of get to the opposite question, and that is that we have stressed with all of the supervisors that we would expect and hope that they would exercise maximum flexibility in terms of keeping people at home teleworking. In other words, there ought to be a really good reason to insist that someone comes to work. And I think I want to make it clear to everyone that I expect flexibility by the supervisors. Remember what the objective was here. The objective was to de-densify or lessen the number of people on campus and therefore lessen the opportunity for this virus to do further harm to those who have to be here as well as those who are at home. We don't want to spread this virus. And so these are all aimed from the point of view of being protective to your health and safety. Alex, we got some more?
Oh, of course. There have been a lot of questions about the new Safe on Campus system and the requirement to be tested. And, people are asking, how often do they need to be tested and if they've been tested recently? Anyway, Mary Drexler is very representative of this. Mary, explain your situation.
Okay, thank you all for taking my question, number one, and I thank you all for the information I'm getting today from myself and my staff. I'm the program director at the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling, which is located at 250 West Pratt Street in Baltimore. I do go into the office because there are certain things that I need to do based on funding that I need to be in the office to complete. And so does my communications director go in. All my other staff are completely teleworking because they can do everything they need to do from computers. And they all do have office computers that were purchased through our grant. I guess my question is, I had a COVID test back in May just because I had surgery in January and there was a concern that I wasn't feeling well and it was negative. But because I go in 2 or 3 times a week, do I need to have a more recent test prior to going into the office? Should I be setting up another one with my doctor? Or I had seen in one of the emails that we could go across the street to the convention center. And that's obviously directly across the street from our offices. So I could do that, but then I would need, I'm assuming, to wait for the results before I go back into the office again, because my last test was in May. And once I get that test, how often do I have to repeat that test? Because I am going to be going in every week. So, and then my other question that relates to that is my communications director is not a UMB staff. She happens to be FPI. So her questions are, do I follow these same guidelines? Because she never gets these emails. I usually just forward them to her. Is there some different standard among FPI versus the university?
Maybe I should start by addressing that. So, let me first of all emphasize that the major way to control this virus is 2 fundamental ways. One is to make sure that we're all aware of personal protective equipment, social distancing, etc. And second of all, if we use the Safe on Campus method and are honest and forthright about symptoms that we're having and reporting, then that will be brought to the attention of a confidential healthcare worker, and you get the attention that you need, whether it's a COVID test or some other thing that you need. So these are strong measures, and they're very important in controlling the spread of this virus. We were not originally planning on doing COVID testing to return to campus, and in part because the scientific merit was lacking in terms of it's one test at one point in time. And what does that have to do with next week? What has occurred over time has just been a lot of push from many sources to say, well, you at least ought to know for 20,000 undergraduates coming back to a campus that we're starting out with a fairly clean slate relative to COVID. So this discussion about whether to do COVID testing to come back on campus really originated from those kinds of discussions, and UMB being part of the system, we have agreed to that. And so the policy basically says, I believe we said before the 17th, but certainly pretty far after that, we're really asking people who are going to be regularly on campus to get a single COVID test and to put that report in Safe on Campus. Now, having said that, there are obviously shades of gray there. And if you're coming in once a week for 2 hours or half an hour or whatever we've put in the policy, then you won't need a test. If you're coming in a regular manner, you need one test. There is no decision and no advice, in fact, yet on whether a follow-up COVID test should be done or not. And I think everyone on this call is aware that getting the test done has been a challenge for our state and our whole institution. So the response is, if you're coming back regularly, you need a COVID test, and the one that you had in March or May would not apply. to that standard. I don't know whether there will be a future requirement for testing. Now, the Baltimore Convention Center is available. I actually went on the website yesterday. There are a lot of appointments available in the next week or two. It's a very smooth operation if you sign up ahead of time. I've talked to a number of people who have told me about their experience, and they've gotten the answer back fairly quickly. In terms of, do you isolate yourself while you're waiting for the result? The general answer is that would be an advantage. So you should try to do that. On the other hand, if you're coming in all by yourself and not interacting, that's a little bit different. But the point here is to de-densify the campus and for those coming on to know their status. I'm sorry for that long-winded answer, Alex.
Are you reading my mind again? Because I hate it when you do that.
Well, Jan asked a lot of questions.
Yes, she did. You know, another question that people are asking, different parts of it, and I want to get to that, is about all the other members in our family who now are being impacted, and that has an impact on us. And you know, how do we make sort of accommodations for that? Chaslin Batchelor is with you. The first of two questions I think that address that. Chaslin, are you with me?
Yes, I am, Alex. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having this forum for some of us who are very anxious and a little anticipatory of the fall season for our students. So I am a second grader, and I'm wondering, as a campus, what my division's initiative is. It's very family friendly. But as a campus, what are the considerations that are being thought of for those who are teleworking, but who are also the primary educators for their children, as kids are also telelearning?
So Juliet or Matt?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the campus is fully aware of the angst that is really permeating across parents of all children K through 12 and younger. There is no one single solution out there at all, regardless of whether we're talking about UMB for this issue. But I can tell you that we are committed as a campus to try to provide what we can in terms of flexibility, leave programs, and everybody's situation is different. And so there is no one answer. So what I would say to Chaslin and anyone else with this particular concern is work with your HR representative or contact HR if you need help navigating what the options are, because everybody's situation is different, and so the answer is going to be different. But we have a lot of leave programs available that are not well understood that could help. If you look at the new telework policy, if you look at the information that's coming out, there's a presumption of flexibility for everybody, not just parents in this situation, but especially for parents in this situation. There's a presumption of flexibility. And what that simply means is that as a campus, we expect that up through the whole line of reporting, that we start with how can we be flexible to make this untenable situation work for each of our employees who we value so much. So what I would say is there's not one answer. There's lots of information out there. It's hard to navigate on your own. I'm on the inside, and sometimes my eyes cross when I read some of this stuff. So we don't expect you all to, but that's what we're here for, and we want to help you navigate through this.
Yeah, Juliet, I agree. To make it even more complex, one solution doesn't fit everybody. So that's the reason people's circumstances are unique, and what solution might benefit one person may not work for the other. Where the presumption of flexibility comes into play is that if you are able to telework, you may be able to flex your schedules so that you are not doing UMB work during a time when your children are doing their K through 12 or other education. So there are lots of options. Our human resources team has been researching a lot of this. There are other people on campus that have been doing it. So I wouldn't assume that just because you haven't found a solution yet that there isn't one out there. Talk to folks. You can Google it, and there's all kinds of things that pop up there. One thing I will point out is on our website, and you can get to it through the COVID website or directly to HR and look at Launch Your Life. There's a growing section of links and resources that we put in there for parents of K through 12 students and how to manage in a remote environment and how to deal with virtual youth learning. So I would encourage you to visit that as well and ask. If something's not working, contact Human Resources and we'll see what we can do to help you out.
And Chaslin, let me add one thing, and that is we're not done yet. We're looking at all kinds of options. Believe me, the pressure is on to come up with creative solutions that perhaps are unique, but perhaps are generalizable too. So a lot going on in those discussions. Alex, next.
Well, the other side of that coin with kids is childcare, all kinds of childcare issues. Jordana Cinieri from nursing is on with us, I think. Jordana?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Hi, thank you so much to the panel and Dr. Jarrell and everyone for your leadership. I have to say I was so heartened to receive your email that reinforced your philosophy about families first. It made my entire pandemic brighter, so thank you so much. So building on Chaslin's question, and I'm so glad that she asked that, if someone is feeling, if an employee is feeling that that telework just isn't working for them and they need to take leave for some reason, can you clarify some of the policies related to leave? For example, can an employee use FMLA leave for this reason?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to do is let everybody know these are all outlined on our website. So if you don't get the answer or what we talk about isn't getting everything out there, you can go to the website and look this up. One of the things that right off the bat USM allowed was a much more flexible use of different kinds of leave for specifically childcare. And that includes sick leave. And then you also have access to all of our extended banks of leave, the ASL, the ESL, and in certain circumstances, FML does apply as well. I hesitate because different situations may call for a different type of leave. And so your specific instance may be different than mine, may be different than Alex's. All of this information is available out on our website, or you can contact Human Resources directly, share your specific experience, and we can work with you to figure out how to best apply all the different kinds of leave that are available.
Juliet, anything to add?
No, I think Matt's got it. Yep.
Okay, Alex, keep rolling.
Okay, one of the difficulties of not knowing and not being able to tell people when it's over is there are a lot of long-term decisions that we try to make in things. Dr. Ray Love from a pharmacy is here with a question about that. Dr. Love?
Yes, first of all, thank you, everyone. This has been a really great session, and I appreciate all of the attention to all of the personal issues that people have that you all have dealt with. But I have a more programmatic issue. And that is some of the grants and contracts that I'm eligible for, because I do have a call center that falls under me, involve being able to make some planning changes and facilitate telework in the future. We never went down that route in the past because of the restrictions on the number of days one could telework. But if this is going to be a long-term circumstance, we'd certainly like to take advantage of increased resources. So we're wondering, what do you think is going to happen in the future, and when will decisions be made so that we can try and bring some more resources in? And in my program, we have the ability to actually get funding for that.
Yeah, Ray, maybe I can help a little bit with that. My first comment would be, please make sure you work with Dean Eddington in your school to make sure she fully understands and can give you the assistance you need to go after these kinds of fundings. Because one of the bright spots in here, which is hard for sometimes for you to see, is that the number of research grants and other kind of service grants and awards that we have applied for here is up by at least 20%. And for those listening, the message there is people are working really hard at home. I know you know that, and you are not alone. A lot of people are really working at the grants. I wish, Ray, I could give you a better feel for what's going to happen. I'm not optimistic, but that doesn't mean that the environment won't change tomorrow. It doesn't mean that a good antiviral or a good vaccine will come along. That has the potential to change the game. And so I wish I could tell you, but I'm not optimistic. If things keep going the way they have been going, we're going to be teleworking and restricted for at least another few months. And I know that's not answering your question, but I can't do any better than that right now. Alex?
All right. Well, I'm going to come to Saifa Poole next. You know Saifa, but I'm going to do Saifa a favor and say before she asks her question that she's not asking about any particular supervisor. Saifa, go ahead, ask your question.
I was talking about you, Alex.
Oh, come on.
No,
I'm not your supervisor.
Hello, everyone. It's so good to see you. And I just want to compliment my leadership as well. I feel real comfortable and just glad the way you are rolling out information, keeping us informed. And I feel really good about that, that I'm under some good leaders. So thank you. My question, you talked a lot about, supervisors being flexible, and we want to believe that our people at UMB are very flexible. But sometimes supervisors, they have bad days too. And if someone is not able to get a flexible, or supervisors not being very flexible, what recourse does an employee have? Who should they go to? HR? How should they handle that?
Yeah, so so just to kind of reiterate what we've been saying through this whole session, the need to be flexible has to do with lowering the number of people on campus to keep us all safe, right? And so if you start from that paradigm of safety, then it really shouldn't be difficult. And I completely understand what you're saying, and know that there are situations where conflict arises because one party thinks that the other has to be on campus. But the paradigm always has to be one of safety. Does it make sense? Can this job be done at home remotely? Does the person have to be on campus? And if the answer is no, the expectation is that people are not on campus. And so if an employee is finding themselves in a situation where that is not being supported and they're being required to come on campus, when they feel like they can do the job remotely, then they should seek out their HR leader to help navigate that, to have a conversation. And not even from a position of antagonism. It could just be this information comes out so quickly, so it's hard for us in HR to keep our arms around it, right? And so supervisors right now are being tasked with tremendous responsibilities that they haven't been tasked with before. They've got to monitor whether employees feel sick or not. Now we've got the SAFE program, do I have to get testing, don't I, the training, all of that. So supervisors are under an immense amount of pressure. I wouldn't assume that this comes from sort of conflict. 9 times out of 10, it just comes from lack of knowledge and just not understanding what the expectations are. So HR obviously would be happy to just mediate a conversation. And in a lot of these cases, that's really what resolves what you're asking about, is a conversation. It's just a sort of reiteration of what the campus expects. Somebody has a misunderstanding about some part of it. We get it all clear and everybody just continues to move forward. Matt, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, it gets back to the concept that we were talking about right at the beginning, which is, as an institution down to individuals, we're still learning a lot about how to do this. And if you have a supervisor that has never managed in a telework environment before, it could be one of knowledge. It's just comfort with the new. So I think we all need to be patient with each other. As Juliet said, HR isn't here to bang on, and say, this is what you need to do. We're here to facilitate conversations so that we can get people effective and productive and, just help people exist. So, we're here to help out.
So Alex, you've got something special from Scott Bittner, so please patch him in.
There's been a lot of questions about expenses. I know that's on people's minds. We're getting near the end of the show, but Scott made a comment about some upcoming changes. Scott, can you explain for everyone, just give them an idea of what's happening?
Sure, yeah. I thought I was sending out to everyone, but it looks like I only sent it to you, Alex.
Yeah,
so,
well.
Yes, so in September, we will be rolling out the ability to use the travel expense statement, a travel expense statement reimbursement process for operating expense, home office type expenses. We'll provide clarity on what type of expenses can be included in that. And guidelines will be coming out for that. But in the meantime, people can get reimbursed for those expenses today through the non-PO process and Quantum Financials with supervisor approval as well to submit those for reimbursement within the financial system today. And also when we use the travel expense statement process, you'll also need to get supervisor approval prior to incurring the expense.
Excellent for that, Scott. Thank you for getting that in here. Alex, we got 4 minutes.
Well, there was one other point someone wanted to get me to ask anonymously. What about, we talked about FPI employees. What about UMB employees who work with FPI? How are they impacted? Because they come under the FPI, rules, but they work for UMB. Can you just explain that? Apparently there are a few people in that category.
What shake and matter you do?
Just one at a time, please.
Yeah, sorry.
So it's always a quandary on our campus. The entire time I've been here, FPI, UMB, and the hospital, right? What do I do? Whose rules do I follow? And I think this question was also referenced in one of the earlier questions as well. And the short answer is that UMB employees have to adhere to UMB guidelines. And we recognize that working in different offices across campus and the different buildings that there are some complexities around some nuances because you're in an FPI environment. But as a UMB employee, you're expected to adhere by the guidelines that UMB has. UMB works very closely with FPI in the hospital, extremely closely. This obviously we can't all work in a vacuum. This is a collective effort. And so that being said, if you have particular areas of concern about your work environment, contact HR so that we can help you navigate that. That's the short answer.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are lots of other pieces to this, but that's
the differences may also be driven by the type of environment you're entering into, clinical versus non-clinical, and so there may be different requirements in those areas as well.
Absolutely.
Alex, we've still got 2 minutes.
Well, I've got a couple of questions about the same thing, so I'll put it out there. I know we've talked about expenses, but there are people who have sort of larger things, furniture, that they either want to buy or they want to know if they can just come to the office and take home. If they're going to spend more of the time at home, can they do that? Is that permissible, and how can they do it?
Yeah, so since we're now facing a longer period of work from home or work from remote locations, that answer is a standard HR answer, which is it depends. In some cases, equipment is not feasible to move from an office environment to home. In some cases, it is. I would encourage anybody who's in that situation to reach out to their department administrator, to reach out to their department director or manager. We have to make sure that anything that leaves campus is actually tagged so that we know that it is UMB property. So for specifics, go to your department administrator or supervisor. If there are other questions from there, we can get HR or the appropriate department within UMB involved in that decision-making process.
Alex, you got one more minute.
Well, I don't have a question for a minute, but I do have Elisa Medina, who wants to pass along an HR. It's not exactly germane, but it's important information. She says we have a confidential career coaching service. Employees can talk with a certified coach about their careers. It's on the HR website. I'm not going to try to read the website out, but if you have questions, it looks like a good resource, and you can book a career development appointment and maybe answer a lot of your other questions that you have about career advancement and development during these times where, you know, we're not around other people to show them what we can do or to get advice or mentoring or some of the training.
Elisa's a great resource. Elisa's a great resource. I'm glad we got that in there.
All right, so our time is up. First of all, I want to thank our two panelists, Juliet and Matt, for this great discussion. It sounds like there's a lot of interest. I'm looking at the participant list, and it was close to what we had with Ray Lewis. And of course, you know, Ray Lewis, you guys are now superstars in the same box as Ray Lewis. Congratulations. So in any event, thank you again for the participants. Again, thank you very much for being a part of this. Alex, I think we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.